Hello everyone. My name is Clare Fogarty, and I am a senior here at Carroll College. In finishing my Latin American Studies minor, I completed a capstone research project. I conducted a study of how borders and immigration are presented in news media. I began my research hoping to find a topic which integrated my international relations major and my Latin American Studies minor. Immigration is an extremely relevant and timely topic in both fields. Once I settled on an analysis of how the media portrays borders, I conducted some initial research. In his book, Border Games: Policing the U.S.-Mexico Divide, author Peter Andreas argues that borders create both a physical and symbolic boundary between states whose image can be shaped to fit the narrative of state control and security. Latin American author Gloria Anzaldúa applies this analysis to the southern U.S. border, referring to the U.S.-Mexico border as an open wound. She states, quote, "Borders are set up to define the places that are safe and unsafe, to distinguish us from them," end quote. With this general idea of borders as physical and symbolic boundaries in mind, I wanted to look into how these boundaries are represented by the news media. Furthermore, I was interested in discovering what differences became apparent in media presentation of the northern versus southern borders of the United States. So first, let's take a look at the relevant literature regarding borders and media. During the 1990s, in a post-Cold War world, two theories of how borders should be managed emerged. There was a push for countries to become more economically integrated, promoting openness between borders. NAFTA is just one example of how this idea was implemented. However, increases in the implementation of security measures grew during the war on drugs. This creates what Andreas and Berkstecker describe as a paradoxical situation between a borderless economy and a barricaded border. After the events of September 11th, the idea of state separation and sovereignty became increasingly relevant as there was a call for the tightening of borders during the War on Terror. Focus shifted as concentration was placed on both the northern and southern borders in response to what was deemed the greatest risk: terrorism. From here, it is important to understand past and current statistics regarding the borders. Despite initial widespread border attention after 9/11, the northern and southern borders did not remain equal in manpower. One U.S. Customs and Border Protection report found that almost 1,000 new agents started working after 9/11, with only 200 of these stationed on the northern border. In 2016, 16,608 agents were stationed on the southern border, patrolling 1,933 miles of border. The other 2,947 agents were stationed on the approximately 3,987-mile-long northern border, not including Alaska. These statistics caused me to question what other differences could affect these inequalities between the two borders. According to a CBP report of the fiscal years from 2007 to 2018, there were 5.7 million nationwide border apprehensions. Only 1% of these occurred at the northern border. Additionally, approximately 65% of drug seizures between 2014 and 2018 occurred at the southwestern border. These statistics indicate that the southern border remains the location of the majority of border enforcement events. However, it is much more difficult to measure the statistics of threats to each border in order to understand whether or not current security conditions are adequate. These statistics remain helpful in understanding current attitudes regarding the comparison of the northern and southern borders. Next, I looked at issues of morality and race. Peter Andreas, in his studies of borders, found that they have become a symbol not just of a state's physical boundaries, but of the moral boundaries of the people. Individuals may have ethical issues with the drug smuggling or illegal immigration that occur at the southern border. Andreas also argues that more attention is given to what is coming into the United States rather than what is going out, such as cocaine to Canada or guns to Mexico. Race may also play a pivotal role in how borders are seen. A A 2002 study found that individuals were much more willing to accept negative stereotypes of Mexican immigrants than of Canadian immigrants. These aversions towards specific ethnic groups influence attitudes about immigration and border management. Media outlets use techniques known as agenda setting or framing to show the public what topics are most important through the stories that they cover. Dunaway, Branton, and Abrahano found in a 2004 study that media frames help individuals to compartmentalize their thoughts about media topics in order to make judgments about them. As the public will not always experience current events in their daily lives, they rely on the information provided by the media. For my own research, I conducted a content analysis study of 281 news articles. These articles were gathered from the Seattle Times, Billings Gazette, San Jose Mercury News, and Houston Chronicle during the 2006, 2010, and 2018 news cycles. These newspapers were chosen due to their proximity to the borders, their popularity within the state, as well as based on the ease of access to their articles online. The years chosen each represent a portion of the articles published during each of the last 3 presidencies, during midterm election years when policy issues such as immigration are prominent within the news media. I searched each news source online by the terms border, immigration from January 1st to December 31st of each year. I chose a random sample of 25 articles per news source during each year and analyzed which borders were referred to. Then I classified each article individually based on which overarching themes were discussed. Finally, I analyzed whether or not ethnic identifiers such as Latino, Hispanic, or Mexican were used when referring to immigrants or U.S. inhabitants within these articles. I first looked at which border is mentioned most often in news articles. I found that 81% of articles referred to the southern border only. 14% did not specify a particular border. 4% referred to the northern border only, and 1% referred to both borders. As you can see in the graph, when compared year to year, there has not been much change in how and which borders are referenced over the 3 years analyzed. Next, I categorized the articles into groups based on the themes they discussed. Some of the most commonly used themes were public opinion and activism, immigration policy, political candidates, and presidential rhetoric. In a 2010 article titled Immigrant Rights Backers to March Saturday in Watsonville, journalist Donna Jones quotes a protester saying, quote, "People start rallying when they are really angry about something," end quote. She continued, quoting another protester saying, quote, "In the long run, the Arizona law is going to help the movement. People have been stagnant or just passive. We need that spark," end quote. This is an example of an article I identified as one reflecting the theme of public opinion and activism due to its coverage of the annual protest. A 2006 article by Spencer Hsu was entitled Lawmakers' Last-Minute Deal Creates Loophole in U.S.-Mexico Fence. This article is an example of the immigration policy theme through its discussion of how lawmakers rushed to approve separate legislation that ensured that a border fence would never be built. These are just some of the examples of articles that I identified based on their themes and the ways journalists presented these ideas. The left-hand figure shows these common article themes. I then compared the most abundant article themes by the borders referred to them within the article. Crime, enforcement, and other topics were discussed the most in regard to the northern border, while public opinion and activism, immigration policy, and other topics were discussed most in regard to the southern border. As Peter Andreas discusses, the symbology of borders may reflect the moral attitudes or boundaries of the people. This data suggests differing sets of moral issues associated with each border. To analyze whether or not any of these themes were discussed more or less over time, I compared the main article themes by the year the article was written. When analyzing the top 4 themes of each year, most articles from all 3 years discussed immigration policy, public opinion and activism, and other themes. This indicates that immigration policy, as well as public opinion and activism, have been consistently represented in media articles over the 3 years. The right-hand graph shows these themes over the 3 years. The most interesting change are the references to presidential rhetoric. Presidential rhetoric regarding the borders has become more commonplace during the Trump administration. Lastly, I looked at the possible usage of ethnicity-based identifiers within the news articles to analyze the impact of race on the symbol of borders. These ethnic identifiers were used to describe immigrants or individuals, but were not counted if they referred to officials, countries, or borders themselves. The left-hand graph shows that 67.26% of the articles did not use any ethnic identifiers. 11.03% used Mexican, 6.05% used Hispanic, 4.63% used Latino, 3.2% used other ethnicity-based identifiers, and 11.03% of the articles used more than one ethnic identifier. As you can see, there is a trend in most articles referring to immigrants that may or may not be associated with the southern border. I also looked at whether or not the usage of ethnic identifiers has changed or not over time. The right-hand graph shows these results. 38.27% of articles in 2006, 43% of articles in 2010, and 18% of articles in 2018 used ethnic identifiers to describe individuals. This would indicate that based on this data, the use of ethnic identifiers in newspaper articles has declined over the past 12 years. A variety of factors could play into this trend. This could be as a result of differing trends in journalistic writing and attempts to be unbiased. However, it could also suggest a decrease in the association of race with the southern border. Due to the complicated nature of this question, further study would need to be conducted in order to understand the influences of ethnicity-based identification in media and whether or not race is implicitly indicated with or without direct ethnic identifiers being used. One of the main conclusions of my research was consistent with my own hypothesis, that the southern border has consistently been referred to more than the northern border in the news. Additionally, news articles overall use a variety of themes to discuss borders and immigration. These differ based on the border they are referring to. Finally, the use of ethnic identifiers decreased between 2006 and 2010. In the future, I hope to possibly expand my research on these ethnic identifiers used in news media. Thank you.